All right, back again. So we all have our book assignments, and we're going to start working on the high poly and trying to make a intricate style game style book. Um, there's a couple different ways to go about it. I'm going to show you how to set up the base mesh inside of ZBrush, at least to get started. If you feel more comfortable doing this in Maya, feel free. At this point, you guys are well adept at either pieces of software, enough to where you can pick and choose what your strengths are. So if you want to start off in Maya, that's perfectly fine. This is just an option how you could start directly inside of ZBrush. So in order to do that, we need to start off with a primitive. And the way I like to think about ZBrush is topology is going to go out the window with the high poly. So don't stress over edge flow too much. Really what we're after is shape and shape language, right? So an easy way to start off with the book might be to start off thinking about the spine of the book and then just pulling out the flaps of the book. So I have my little boot up screen here. And don't pay attention if my material looks different than yours. The mech caps, once again, don't really matter. It's just for modeling. I'm going to go ahead and grab a cylinder. And I'm going to turn on my floor, which is... Oh, where is it? Right here. Right. Excuse me. So we have a cylinder in our floor. Now remember, I consider these empty swatches, meaning these are primitives, but they're not actually made into a polymesh object yet, unlike anything you might import or whatever. So it only affects these primitives, and we get a little bonus initialize tab down here in our menu set. Now this only exists with these 3D primitives. As soon as I push this button, this changes and does something completely different. So, kind of weird and wacky, but just remember primitives, initialize. And this is kind of like the attribute editor or the channel box inside of Maya, where I can change its alignment and orientation and its divisions. So I'm going to turn on, poly F right here, which is our wireframe. And I want to align this down the Z axis. So my book is going to be kind of laying down flat this way. If you prefer your book to be upright, that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to do it this way. So I'm going to lower my H divide here down to 12. You could probably go a little bit lower or even a little bit higher. It doesn't really matter. And I'm going to open up my inner radius here so it becomes a pipe. Depends on how thick you want your book. Just pick something like that. And from here, we could just click Make Polymesh 3D at the top. So now we have an actual polygonal object that we can start messing with. Now obviously this is a little too short and stubby to be the spine of a book. So the easiest thing we're going to do is move, scale, and rotate this guy. So we're just going to hit W to get our gizmo. And once again, my gizmo might look different. I just changed it in the preferences. This is just what I like. You can use the default or whichever one you choose. It doesn't matter. And I'm just going to grab the Z axis box, which is this guy, the blue guy, and just grab and pull. Okay, hit Q to drop that. And so now we have this long pipe, but we need exactly half to create the book flaps. So we need to delete half of this pipe here. Best way to do that, we're gonna hold down Control and Shift so we get our selection brushes. You can see my brushes change. I'm gonna, while holding Control and Shift, click and drag out a marquee. Now this green means it's gonna select this area and hide everything else. We want the opposite. So always the alternative to anything in ZBrush is the Alt key. Hold it. It's going to hide everything. There we go. Geometry. Modify topology. Now modify topology is a great tab for anything like you really need to change the geometry of something. Things like mirror and weld. Delete hidden, which is what we're going to use. Closing holes. There's even check mesh and fix mesh. So this is a very powerful little tab. We're just going to click delete hidden. So now our hidden geometry is just gone. I can't get it back. And then we're going to click close holes. So close holes indiscriminately closes any hole in the mesh. It just, all of them, just all at once. It does a pretty good job. However, you can see the topology is not great. But that's okay. Once again, we're not getting too deep into topology for our high poly. We just want the shapes, and then we're going to re-topologize it. The one benefit this has is that you can see it creates a separate poly group, meaning these are a separate color. This is going to make our selection way, way easier. So now we're going to select these faces and pull them out, and the rest of the spine is going to stay put. So I just need to select, so I'm holding Control and Shift, You can see right here. And it's just finding the vert. Usually it's on the corners. There we go, because it's very low poly. So Control Shift and clicking on this color hides everything else. Now I'm going to mask these two pieces. An easy way to do that, the hotkey is Control and A as an atom, and that's going to mask everything on screen. Now I need to bring the rest back. So Control Shift back to our selection and just click anywhere on the canvas. There we go. Now we have the problem that this is reversed, right? So this is masked and the pipe green space isn't. We need the opposite. So while holding down the mask button, you can see my cursor changes to mask mode. It's bright yellow, says mask. And then just go ahead and click anywhere on the canvas. That will always give you the inverse. That's how you inverse the mask. If you're not too sure, you could always come down to your masking options. And we actually have all of these options here. There's an inverse button, and it actually gives you the hotkey, right? I guess you could do Control I as well. There we go. So with this guy unmasked, now we can just pull out this red part and create the flaps of our book. So hitting W for move, and if we go ahead and move it, we can see we already have a problem, and that we are really stretching these polygons. It would be nice to have some loops and even topology for sculpting, or just, just in general rule of thumb. So a little trick, if we have part of a mesh masked and we need to move a piece that's unmasked inside a ZBrush, if we hold down Control and Shift, just like our selections here, and drag out, it will add a loop every single time. So let's go from the top. So Control and Shift and pull out, there's a loop. This makes our life easier. And maybe, there we go. So there's the start of our bookshelf. Now at this point we still have this funky geometry, and if we go ahead and divide, you can see here there's not enough loops around the edges and it's going to collapse. So there are ways around this. We could delete this and actually use ZModeler and close this off and add loops in ZModeler. To be honest, I don't think it's worth it. Since we're going to be sculpting on this guy anyhow, let's just Dynamesh it. So go to Geometry, Dynamesh, and we'll keep it pretty low. I'm going to do like 312. And Project, I just want to be able to hold these hard edges. If you go too low, the edges might not hold, and that's really all I'm concerned about. Turn off Blur, Dynamesh. Okay, there we go. In fact, that might have actually been a little too high. We could probably go way lower. But that's fine. So maybe try just 128. That might be fine enough. So now we have an even sculptable surface. We might have to smooth to get rid of these faceting points here, these polygons. But that's fine. And we're ready to, let's maybe shrink this down just a little bit. And we're going to insert our book pages. Before I do that, I'm going to center this guy. I want to make sure it's centered in the world. You can see here it's been kind of traveling off my grid. There's a couple easy ways to do this. We could just try and center it using this guy, but it's not going to be exact. There's this really nice macro that I gave you guys. If you go up to macro at the top, I'm just going to dock it. Open up macros. These are all little handy little scripts that will certainly help you. There's one called, where is it? Center Mesh to World. Center Mesh to World right here. I have this as a button on my own little custom interface. I love it. You just click it, and it's going to throw it right at 0, 0 for you. That makes life a little bit easier. Okay, so Center Mesh to World. It's right in macros. We're going to make the sort of interior pages for the book. Now these are going to be hand sculpted, so they will look hand sculpted. But so that means we just need to jam a shape in here. In order to do that, I'm going to go to Subtool, and we just need a separate block. So I'm going to grab Append, which will, once again, you append items into your subtool palette, meaning the next item, and the next, and you just keep cascading down, right? So if I click Append, I'm just going to pick a cube. Now the weird funky thing is if you append a primitive into a scene, it automatically creates a Polymesh 3D object for you. You don't have to hit the button. It's only if it's by itself in its own scene that you have to do that. It's kind of weird and funky. Just remember, if you append, you don't have to do that. So here's our pages. Make sure it's selected. Hit W again. And all we need to do, just like Maya, is just kind of squish, move, scale, rotate, and start fitting this guy in. Okay, now you can see here we have sort of a rounded spine and a square base here for the pages. Easy way around that is I'm just going to grab my move brush. It's going to be retopologized anyhow, so it's just about fitting shapes together. And we can just kind of tuck all this in. For now, we could always change this later. Maybe the spine is looking a little bit too round. Come back up here. Maybe kind of squish this guy a bit. Oops, and I just dynameshed. Okay, so that was a mistake. I accidentally had hit Control and clicked and swiped on the canvas. And if you have Dynamesh, once you click it, it stays on by default, so you can continue to Dynamesh. That's why I always suggest if you're done, just make sure to turn the button off, just so that doesn't happen. It's just annoying. So here we have our book, and if we wanted to start manipulating our book spine, we certainly can. A nice big angled brush, and we can start just tucking things in and making it the way we like. So it might work best to smooth it out first, or you know, sculpt it however you want. But anyways, that is our book base. So from here we can start detailing it up, adding straps, and just whatever we got to do. So there we go.